Hello, this is Professor Lawrence Orihuela, the instructor for CSE2000Q2S, Computer Science 2, and this is the video that shows you how to solve all of the questions of the practice midterm, as you can see. Okay, so the practice midterm was posted on Blackboard since day one when the class started, so I hope you had ample time to look at this and try all the questions yourself, but if not, that's perfectly fine. This video is going to be useful to you either way. So if you looked at the practice midterm, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that I completely made up. So you'll find that question 1 and 2, they're both very similar to lab 1. Question 3 is similar to lab 2. Question 4 is about user-defined functions. It's similar to lecture activity 3, and the last question is very similar to lecture activities 4 and 5. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get started. So question 1. A gardening business has hired you to write a C++ program that calculates the cost to fertilize a rectangular allotment that is X feet long and Y feet wide. As you can see in the diagram, we have length and width of a rectangular allotment. So the program must meet the following requirements. I think we can read these off as we're coding. So what I'd like you to do is open Visual Studio and we can get started. So create new project, choose C++ empty project. Let's see. Let's save this in a place where we can I guess it wouldn't hurt to make a new folder for this. So let's call it practice midterm solutions, like that. Go to this folder and let's call this PM_Q1, I guess. Well, you don't have to code this yourself. Because you're not turning this in, as you can see, this practice midterm, it has no impact on your grade. So you don't have to code this with me. You just have to watch. So you don't have to make a new folder or create this project. Just watch, okay? So create. Okay. So right-click source files, click add new item. For your CPP file, I guess I'll call it PM_Q1. I guess that makes sense, right? So add. So I think what I'll do is I'll put Visual Studio here and then the question here. And then we can have the question here as I'm coding here. Or how would it look if I did it the other way around? Let's see. Is this no. I liked it better the other way. Okay, there we go. So let's put in our typical C++ jargon. We're going to include, well, let's make it 150% so you can see it. Include IOStream using namespace standard int main return 0. Okay, so requirements, there's 5 in total. So the program must meet the following requirements. One, the program must first greet the customer. Okay, so let's see out something like, I don't know, hello, this program will calculate the cost to fertilize your allotment. And let's end the line twice. Okay, so the program greets the user, so that's the first requirement out of the way. Alright, what's next? It must then ask the customer's name, then the length of the allotment in feet, then the width of their allotment in feet. Okay, so it seems to me that we're going to make 3 variables here. We're going to need a string called name. We're going to need an int of length. Length is x, so I guess I'll call it length x. It doesn't really matter. And then int width y. Okay. So it must ask these 3. It must prompt the user to enter these 3 values. So here's what we're gonna do: cout. Please enter your name. cin name. Now we could cin name like this. But as you already know, if you wanted to enter a name, like a full name with a space between, what you would use is getLine instead. And I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say, please enter your full name. So instead of saying cin, I will include iomanip. Was it iomanip? And I will use getLine cin, comma, name. It's not getLine? I'm sorry, I gotta look this up. Sorry. If it's not iomanip, what is it? Oh, it's includes string. My bad. So, yeah, I gotta change this to string. Yeah, I get my libraries confused sometimes, but this should. Yeah, there we go. Now, whether you use getLine or cin, that makes no difference to me as long as it does its intended purpose. So, we will enter the full name. Cout. Please enter the length of allotment in feet, and then we'll use cin this time because we're not getting the line, and then we'll say length x, and then the third variable cout please enter the width of the allotment in feet. Cin width y. And I guess we'll end the line again. Cout end line. Just so that there's room. Okay, so that's requirement 2 out of the way. Alright. A single bag of fertilizer will cover 35 square feet and cost $10.95. Divide the square feet of the allotment by 35 and then multiply by $10.95 to find the cost of fertilizing the entire area. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So I think we're going to make a new variable called cost. So double cost. So cost is going to be equal to length times width divided by 35 times 10.95. So cost equals length times width, like that, and then divided by 35 times 10.95 Now, I don't need to put parentheses because, as you already know in arithmetic, multiply, divide, they're in the same level of precedence. So it would make no difference to the value if I put parentheses or not. Okay? So there's that. So, and now it says the total is subject to a 2.5% sales tax. Now, in order to add that 2.5%, adding 2.5% is the same as multiplying the total by 1.025. Can we agree on that? Okay. Alright, lastly. I knocked these two out, so let's cross that out. And then lastly, the program must terminate when addressing the customer by name, and then telling him the final cost of fertilizing the allotment. So, let's say, Cout, thank you, comma, name, well, it would make better sense if the comma was after the name. I'll put that here. Your total cost is, comma, or colon, cost. And let's end line twice so that it knows. And I believe that's it. So this is your entire solution for question 1 of the practice midterm, as you can see. And as you can see, it didn't even, well, if I eliminate that space, it doesn't even take 28 lines, so how easy is that? So let's run this to see if it works. So my full name is Lawrence Orihuela, and it'll take it because I'm using a get line instead of cin, which means it's ignoring the blank space. The length of my allotment feet, I don't know, let's say 15. And the width of the allotment, let's call it 12 feet. Thank you, Lawrence Orihuela. Your total cost is $56 and that much. Now, there's a couple things that you can do to improve this program, because if you're working as a software engineer, there's gonna be, as you're running your program over and over, you'll find little tiny details to improve upon it. Now, if this was the real midterm and you submitted your program, your answer like this, I would give you the full points, but it doesn't hurt to like make it better. Like, one thing I can do to make it better is put a $sign here, and another thing I can do to make it better is show precision to 2 decimal points so it shows dollars and cents. So I'm actually gonna do that, even though it's not necessary. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put a $sign here, like this. And now to set precision to 2, I'm going to include IO_manip. In case you didn't know, IO_manip stands for input-output manipulation. And if you go to like c++.com, it'll give you all, like, a ton of information about what kind of functions you have if you include these libraries. But that's beyond the scope of this class. Like, programming is like an art, and it takes years to like master it because there's so many little nuances. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So in order to show precision to 2 decimal points, what you need to do is the very first line of the program needs to be cout fixed show points, and then set precision, and in parentheses put the number of decimal points you want to be precise to. I'm going to put it to 2. semicolon. So here is the program now. Let's run it again. Uh, 15, 12. My cost is $56.12. Let's see if that's correct. So 15 times 12, divide that by 35, multiply this by 1095, and then multiply that by 1.025. Did I do it wrong? This is wrong. Okay, here's a thought. Let's change these ints to doubles, because maybe there's decimal points that's getting lost in calculation. So let's change this. Well, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. Let's change int length x to double, and then int width y to double. And then maybe then it'll be more accurate. My bad. I didn't think about that. There we go. That's more like it. So, yeah. I should have been more wary about this problem, because in integer division, the decimal points get lopped off, and that's why the cost was showing less than what it was supposed to be. But yeah, this would be your entire code for question 1. Okay. Question 2. Let's close this and open a brand new Visual Studio. PM-Q2. Create. Okay. Add. For your CPP file, I guess we'll call it PM-Q2. Add. Okay. So, a long-distance telecommunications company has hired you to write a C++ program that calculates the total cost for an international call from one of their payphone machines. It must meet the following requirements. 1, the program must first greet the customer. Well, we can read these requirements off as we're writing. So, include IO stream using namespace standard int main return 0. So the program must first greet the customer. So let's say cout hello. This program will calculate the cost of your call. Colon and line semicolon. Okay. Let's end the line twice so there's a room. Okay. And then second, the program must then ask for their name, then the number of minutes that was the duration of the call. So same thing as before. We're gonna need a string called name, and I would say int minutes, but I don't want to run into the problem that we had when we were doing question 1, so I'll call it a double. That way there's no fractionals that are getting lost. Minutes So cout, please enter your name. Okay. cin. Well, I want to enter a full name, so I'm gonna do what we've done before and include string, which gives me access to the getLine function. So getLine cin name, and then the second variable, which is minutes, cout, please enter the number of minutes that you called colon, cin minutes. Okay, let's end the line. Okay, so we knocked out this requirement. We knocked out this requirement. Now the cost is calculated as follows. There's a base fee of $3.5. Well, $3.50, and then the first 5 minutes is free, but every minute after the 5 will cost an additional 75 cents. The program terminates when addressing the customer by name and telling them how much they owe. Okay, so we're gonna need another double called cost, and then so cost is going to be equal to there's a base fee of $3.50, so we're going to put 3.5 there. Okay, and then the first 5, here's the trick, the first 5 minutes is free, but every minute after 5 will cost an additional 75 cents. Okay, so we're going to need an if statement to see if the call is less than 5 minutes or if it's greater. So if it's less than 5 minutes, the cost would be 3.5. So let's actually do it like this instead. So I'll delete this. So let's say if minutes is less than or equal to 5. And then we'll say else. So I'm going to put a couple comments here so you understand what's happening. So this code would execute, the code in these brackets would execute if minutes was less than 5. If min is less than or equal to 5. And if this statement evaluates to be false, this code would never happen. And because of this else is here, this code would happen instead. So I'm going to put another comment if min is greater than 5. Because if a number isn't less than or equal to 5, it has to be greater than 5. There's no alternative, right? So if it's this, the cost would be equal to 3.5. Okay. However, if the call lasts longer than 5 minutes, here's how we'll calculate it. So cost equals 3.5, but we're gonna need to multiply every minute that's after 5 by 75 cents. So we're gonna say minutes minus 5 and multiply that by 0.75, like that. So you already learned arithmetic in the very first lecture. So because this parentheses is here, this would occur first, then this multiplication, then this addition to the 3.5. Okay? So we covered the third requirement. And then lastly, the program terminates when addressing the customer by name and telling them how much they owe. So we're going to say cout thank you name, comma, you owe, colon, period, end line, semicolon. Let's put it to 100% so you can see everything. So this is your answer to question number 2, if this was the real midterm. And as you can see, it's only 34 lines of code. Well, different answers might vary, but you know what? I think since this is very similar to the first question, I can see that after I run this, I'm probably going to want to put a $sign here. And then I'm probably going to want to set precision to 2, so it shows dollars and cents. So I'm going to do what I did before. Include IOManip. And then for the very first line, I'm going to say cout fixed set precision. Oh, my bad. I did it in the wrong order. It's show points. Then set precision to. Okay, so maybe if I widen this, is this better? So I can put it to 150% and you can see it. Okay, let's run it. Okay, please enter your name. The minutes, let's call it 70 minutes. The bill is going to be super high, probably. Yeah. $52.25. So, word to the wise, never use a phone machine, because it costs way too much. But anyways, I believe this calculation is correct. Let's find out. Put this here. 70 minus... The first 5 minutes is free. I'm going to multiply this by 0.7. And then I'm going to add 3.5. Oops. I did it wrong. 70 minutes minus 5. Times 0.75. Plus 3.5. Yep, it's correct. Okay, so that's question 2. Let's see question 3. Now, the remaining questions are actually super easy. It doesn't involve nearly as much code because much of the code is already pre-written for you. Let's call this project PM Q3. Put you here. Add a CPP file. Let's call it PM Q3, like that. Add. So, question 3. Professor Lawrence Orihuela needs to make himself look better as an instructor and has decided to give each of his students a 20-point increase in all their grades. Help him write the C++ code that will allow him to do this. Consider the code on the next page. It creates an array of 10 structs called students, which contain their name and their grade. It is nearly complete. Your task is the following. Complete the user-defined function called add20. You will need to create a for loop that iterates through the 10 students and adds 20 to their grade. A student cannot have a grade higher than 100, so if their grade exceeds 100, you have to set it equal to 100. You only need to write code in the shaded region. Okay? So over here's the code. Here's what I'll do. I'll copy-paste this into here. all this, copy, paste. And now that that's there, you actually don't need to see this anymore. So here's what I'll do. So I'm trying all these different things to make this visible to you. So let's take a moment to analyze this program, okay? We got your include IO Steam, you're using namespace standard. Over here we have the definition of a struct called student. We learned structs in the previous video, right? Now struct has two member objects, a string name and an int grade, okay? Here are two user-defined function prototypes. One's print array, which is there only for convenience, and then the other one's the add 20 function, which is the function that we're going to complete. So in your int main, we have an array of 10 objects that are all objects of student, okay? So we have an array of size 10 that are all of type student, of data type students. Student is defined up here. And for each of the 10 students, they're defined here because, as you already know from the arrays video, counting for an array starts from 0. So we have 10 objects labeled 0 through 9, okay? Now, the first item listed is the name. The second item listed is their grade, okay? Now, our goal is to have this add 20 function add 20 to all of them, okay? So we're going to see out NL before adding 20, and then we're going to print the array, which will just print all these. And then after we add 20, we'll print it again, and this will show us, if we define this correctly, this will show us that all of the grades have been changed, okay? So I actually put more room here than you actually need, because if this was the real midterm, the other way that you could submit this is just print out the test and write the code with pen. But I think most of you would want to code instead of write with pen. Well, that's just my way of thinking. So here's how we would do this. So we need a for loop that iterates to the 10 students and adds 20 to the grade. That's very easy. So the only place that you need to write code in this entire thing, all of this, the only place you need to write code is in the gray area. That's it. You're not adding code anywhere else. You're not adding code to the int main. Just the function, okay? So we're going to iterate through the 10 students. So for, we're going to say int I equals 0. 0 is going to be a starting point. This loop will iterate until this statement is no longer true. I is less than 10. And each time we iterate, we will increment I by 1. So I plus plus. This guarantees that the for loop will iterate 10 times. Now, for each of these, I'm going to have to add 20. So here's what I'm going to do. Now, because each of the 10 members is a data type of students, I'm going to here's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to say the array is called A, so I'm going to say A at position I. Now I need to access the grade, right? Now because student is defined here as a struct and it contains two member objects and I need to access grade, how do I access grade? Well, if you recall from lecture video 6, the way you access members of a struct is with the dot operator. So I'm going to put dot here. And you see I have two options, name and grade. I need grade. So A at position I, dot grade. We're going to set that equal to itself plus 20. Okay? Now, another way you can do this, instead of saying that, you could say plus equals 20. This line of code is completely equivalent to this line of code. So I don't really care which one you choose. Well, I'm going to choose this one because it's shorter. So this accomplishes the same task. It adds 20 to the grade. Okay? So there's that. The other stipulation is that a student cannot have a grade higher than 100. If their grade exceeds 100, you have to set it equal to 100. That makes sense, right? You can't have a grade over 100, right? So it seems to me like each time we iterate, we're going to need an if statement here. So we're going to need an if statement inside the for loop that checks if the grade surpassed 100, okay? Now, I can see a couple cases in which that'll happen. 78, it wouldn't happen here. It would happen here. 90 plus 20 is 110. It would happen here. I think those are the only two cases. Okay. So, if statement inside the for loop. If A at position I dot grade is greater than 100, and inside of this if statement, we're going to set AI dot grade equal to 100. A at position I dot grade equals 100. Now, you see this 8 lines of code, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These 8 lines of code is all you need to answer this question. Okay? Well, let's run it to make sure it works. Well, actually, I'll put a comment here. Well, I'll put 2 comments. Solution just so you know. Say that. Let's run this now to see if it works. So here's what the grades were before adding 20. So 78 plus 20 is 98. 90 plus 20 is 110. But because 110 was greater than 100, this if statement activated and this code executed, setting it equal to 100. It did the same here and here. But yeah, so it looks like this works. So we did it, and here's our answer. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy these 8 lines of code, and I'm going to put it here. Well, would it look better if I... No, that wouldn't do it. Is it this? No. Maybe it's this. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, I put more space than you needed because in case you wanted to complete this using pen and paper instead of code. Okay? So that's question 3. Let's look at question 4. New project. PM Q4 create add new item, call this source file PM Q4 add. So let's include IOStream using namespace standard int main return 0. So question 4 has two parts. Part A, write a user-defined function named print plus that when called will output the following sequence of characters. So we have a plus here that's constructed with x's, okay? Now, you should have learned how to make user-defined functions in lecture activity 3, right? So here's what we're going to do. Because this is a function that's not outputting data, this is going to be a void function, okay? So void, it's going to be called print plus. And it looks to me like this function isn't going to take any parameters. So I will just put open close parentheses with nothing in it, squiggly brackets. And now when this is called, it needs to output this. So here's what I'm going to do. Cout in double quotes. Looks like there's 3 spaces, then 3 x's, then 3 more spaces. So space, 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 x, x, x. I don't need to put more spaces. You wouldn't see them anyways. And then it looks like we do it again. So I will copy this line, put it here, and now we have to output 9 x's. So cout x, 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 x. And looks like we're gonna do it again. For this, we did this. We're gonna do this line now. And then we're gonna do these 2 lines again. Here and here. Okay. So the last thing we need to do is put our function prototype up top between our using namespace standard and our int main. So I'm going to copy this, put it right here, and add a semicolon. Okay. So let's see. In our int main, let's call the function to see if it works. Okay. So I'm going to say print plus, and just because why not, I'll call it 3 times just to see if it works. Okay. Oh, my bad. I made a mistake here. What I should have been doing is ending these lines after each thing. So here's what I'm going to do. End line. I'm going to do this here, 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 and here. So now it should work because I'm ending the lines. Yep. Well, you would see it better if I ended one more line. So let's try it again. There we go. So my print plus user-defined function is complete. Okay. Now, part B. Write a user-defined function named print pyramid that, when called, will accept an integer called pyramid size and output a sequence of stars such that our pyramid size number of rows and the number of stars increment as rows descend. For example, if pyramid size was of size 3, it would output these sequence of characters. If it was 5, it would output these. If it was 6, it would output this and then 6 more stars. If it was 2, it would just output this. You get the picture, right? And so on. So I put a little hint here. You will need a for loop in a for loop. Okay? So now, because this function is outputting characters, instead of returning data, this is actually going to be another void function. So void print pyramid, like that. And it's going to accept an integer called pyramid size. So int pyramid size. Okay. Now, so it's kind of tricky putting for loops inside for loops, but it's not so bad if you can, like, in your head you can compartmentalize the work. So the way I see it, the first for loop is going to be starting a new row, right? Now the number of rows is going to be equal to pyramid size. So I'm going to have an outer for loop that iterates pyramid size number of times, okay? So for int I equals pyramid size. Oh, my bad. This should say I equals 0. My bad. I forgot how to write a for loop. What's wrong with me? So this will iterate until this statement is no longer true. I is less than pyramid size. And then each time we iterate, we're going to add 1 to I. I plus plus. Okay. So that's the first for loop. We need to think about the second for loop now. So in order to do the next row, we're going to need to see out end line here. See out end line. So the first for loop is in charge of creating a new row. The second for loop is in charge of outputting the right number of stars, okay? But each time we complete a row, we need to end the line. Does that make sense? So we're going to need another for loop inside of here. So for int, now here's the issue. I can't use I again because this for loop is inside this for loop. I is included in the scope of this other for loop, so I can't use I because it would consider I. If I put I here, this I and this I would be considered the same, and we don't want to do that. So let's call this int j. Okay, j equals 0. Now, it seems to me like we're going to output stars equal to the number of pyramid size. Okay? So j is going to iterate pyramid size numbers of times as well. So j is less than pyramid size. Like that. And then each time we increment, j will increment squiggly brackets there. Now, we need to output a star each time this for loop iterates. So we're going to say cout star. And I believe that will make it work. I think. Well, the only way to find out is if we ran it. So here's what I'll do. I will take this. This is my function prototype. I will put it up top, add a semicolon, delete the name. Okay. Now, let's call our print pyramid function. Print pyramid. Let's try 3. Let's try this for a number of cases. We're going to try it for 4. Let's do it again for 5. Let's see, 5. Let's try it. Fingers crossed. Oh, my bad. It's outputting more than it should. So let's use our brains here. maybe this... So the outer for loop's working fine. The inner for loop is having trouble. So maybe it shouldn't increment pyramid size times. It should be it should be doing it I number of times, right? Yeah, let's try I, because in the first iteration, I becomes 1, and then it becomes 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. So maybe changing it to I will make it work. Let's see. So here's our 3, 4, and our 5. Oh. I actually made one more mistake. So you probably noticed this already, but the thing with for loops and arrays and all that stuff is that count starts from 0. So when I was 0 in the first iteration, J was 0, so 0 being less than 0, this was no longer true. So this for loop never happened. So I shouldn't be continuing this loop until J is no longer less than I. I should be doing it until J is no longer less than I plus 1. That will fix it. Because, as I said before, count starts from 0. And that's why you're not seeing the first. So, this should work now. And let's try it. 3, 4, 5. Perfect. So that's how you do question 4. I'll zoom out so you can see it. It's right here. So close that. We're almost done. The last question. Consider the code on the next page. It creates a vector of 5 ints. You want to make the vector contain only odd numbers. In the spaces designated, perform the following. Again, we can read these off as we're coding. So open Visual Studio again. Create a new project. C++. Yeah, same folder. PM Q5. For the CPP file, call it PM underscore Q5. Add. So the code on the next page is all here. Okay. Copy this, stick it here. Now, the same thing I did before, I ended up putting more spaces than you actually need, because that's for those of you who want to do your test with pen and paper. But I don't think anyone will. But anyways, requirements. Write a line of code that will remove the last element of the vector. Actually, I wrote everything in these couts. So we actually don't need to see this anymore. I'll do this. Well, I think the first thing you want to see is how this looks without writing anything. So let's do that. So this is how the vector looks before. The vector's not changed, the vector's not changed, the vector's not changed. Okay, well, we'll get to those. So, for this first part, write a line of code that will remove the last element of the vector. Now, you already know the vector function that removes the last element of the vector, right? Well, at least I hope you do. It's called popback. So we're going to say v, because that's the name of our vector, v.popback. So it's just one line of code. V dot pop back. Oops. Now, because pop back is a member function of the vector library, we need open and close parentheses, semicolon. And it looks like this, just one line of code will do this, okay? So this will remove 14. And we can see that if we actually run it. So this was the vector before. After removing the last elements, we can see that 14 is gone. It used to be here, now it's gone, okay? So it looks like we did part A. Oh, come on. Alright. Write a line of code that will add 17 to the back of the vector. Okay? Now, you already know what vector function it is that adds new members to the vector. It's called pushback. So I'm going to say v dot pushback. And inside the parentheses, I have to say the member in which I wish to add. So it's 17. I'm going to put 17. Like that. Let's run it and see if it did it. Yeah, you'll notice that this question is very similar to lecture activities 4 and 5, right? Okay. So that's that step. Let's cross it off. Alright, lastly, declare an iterator for a vector of ints. Move it to the position of 44 and erase it. Okay? Now, you already know how to make an iterator. If you don't know, you might want to refer to the previous lecture slides. But to make an iterator, you say int. No, that's not it. You would say vector. Inside of chevrons, you say the data type of the thing that you're trying to make. So int, and then colon colon, the key term iterator. Okay. Now we can name this iterator anything we want, because it's a variable like any other. Let's just call it ITR, because that's what we've been calling our iterators. Okay. Now we have our iterator. What we need to do is point it to the vector. So let's have ITR point to the very first member. Okay. Well, the vector is actually going to change after we do these two things. So let me run this one more time and let's see the position of the numbers. Okay. So we got 25, then 65, then 44. So 44 is the third item. And we need to erase it. So we need to make ITR point to 44. So if I set ITR equal to v.begin, doing this will have ITR point to the very first item, which is 25. I need to make it point to 44, so it looks like we're going to increment ITR twice. So down here, you could do it one of two ways. You could say ITR plus plus, ITR plus plus. That will do it. But a more efficient way of doing it is using the advanced function like I mentioned before. So instead of saying this, I'm going to say advance ITR and move it 2 positions. Okay? So now I can use the erase function. So I'm going to say v.erase. And inside the parentheses, I need to have my iterator variable. It's called ITR. Okay? That should do it. So this question took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code for one question. This should be like, and this is very similar to the real midterm too. So this should be like the easiest midterm of your lives. Well, I hope. Well, let's run this to see if it actually works. Okay. So, if you recall, our goal was to make a vector of 5 ints. Make a vector of ints, but have it contain only odd numbers by doing these instructions. So, we removed 14, we added 17, and we erased 44. So now it contains only odd numbers. Yep. So, and that's it for your practice. Oh, save. That's it for your practice midterm. So, yeah. So, just code those 5 different things. And yeah, that's it. Now, another question that you probably had in mind was how to submit your work. So, yeah, that's a good question. How to submit your work. Let's let me open the practice midterm again. So, actually, let's look at the real midterm because I already have it written. So, this is your real midterm, by the way. What did I say here? You can code it on submit 4/5 separate CPP files. Email it to me with this test attached and the cover page is filled out. So, here's how you would submit it. Assuming that this was the real midterm, but it's not. So I would say, assuming this is the real midterm, here's what I want you to do. Put your name, dates, and your student ID in the designated areas. Like here, name. The date today is, what's 10/8. As I'm recording this. Let's underline this. Underline this. Okay. I'd like to save this. And then I'm going to go to email. Now, you would email this to me, right? So, call it CSE2000Q2S, last name, first name, midterm, right? Is that how I said to do it? I'm sorry, guys. I don't remember the stuff I wrote. Yeah, like this. And then you would attach 4/5 separate CPP files and mail it to me with this test attached and the cover page is filled out. So what I'd like you to do, save that. So there's 6 items you need to attach. The actual test with the cover page is filled out, and then the 5 separate CPP files. So I would go here. Practice midterm, open that, and then look for the CPP files of the 5 separate programs. Okay, now I put this all in a new folder. I'm happy I had that foresight to do that. Practice midterm solutions. So I would have to go in here, select the CPP file. Let's get the one for number 2. So back here, get this CPP file. Back here, get this CPP file. Here, this one, and lastly, this one. So all of them would be here. And you would just send it to me, say, I don't know, hi, professor, and then just email it to me. Now, I probably should have said this in the beginning of the course, but the reason why I want you to email all of your work to me is because I looked at submitting work through Blackboard, and I hate it. Okay, that's the only reason why I have you submit your work through email. I think every professor in CSUSB hates submitting work through Blackboard. But anyways, that's what you would do if this practice midterm was the actual midterm, okay? Now, it didn't take that long to do this, okay? In fact, the recording time as of now is 1 hour and 6 minutes. That's not bad for a midterm, okay? You could probably complete it faster than me because I was spending the majority of my time, like, talking. And you're probably gonna get more of your questions right, considering that you have access to pretty much everything, because it's a take-home midterm, right? Now over here is your actual midterm. I'm going to post this in Blackboard eventually, right? Now, if you want to read this, you can, like, pause the video and read all this. But you have access to everything. You have access to the useless textbook, the PowerPoints, the activities, the labs, and the practice midterm solutions video, which you're watching right now. Okay? The only thing you cannot use is your fellow classmates, but that's it. And but yeah. So we're at 1 hour and 7 minutes right now. So I guess the last thing I want to do is show you just how similar the practice midterm is to the real midterm. So I'll post this on Blackboard eventually, but for now, let's just do it this way. So let's look at how similar question ones are. Oh, and I should have probably mentioned this before. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be printing out your I'm going to be printing out your midterms one by one so I can grade it with pen, because I kind of like doing that. So because of that, I'm going to have to ask that on the front page of your real midterm, you don't put your full name. You have to put your name on the second page, okay? On the first page, you need to put your student ID, your date, and I'm going to put the score here later, okay? The reason why I'm asking you to do this is because when I'm grading, I actually can't allow other people to see what the grades are, because that's like student-professor confidentiality. I had to go through a whole training video about that, but anyways. So let's compare question ones, okay? So you already know question one of the practice midterm. So this actually isn't too different. So you're painting the walls of a rectangular room in your house that's X feet long, Y feet wide, and Z feet tall. Okay. There's one tiny difference. You're dealing with height now instead of just length and width. And you decide that you don't want to waste too much money buying too many gallons of paint, and you also don't want to drive back there to the store if you accidentally buy too few gallons. So you plan ahead and do what any reasonable person does. Write a C++ program that calculates how many gallons of paint you need, okay? So the program must meet the following requirements. Very similar to this, it asks the user to enter the dimensions of the room, X, Y, and Z, which will be interpreted as length, width, and height respectively. Obviously, you don't need to paint the floor or the ceiling, so in the program, write a mathematical equation. This is where arithmetic comes in, that finds the total square feet of the four walls, okay? Divide this number by 200 because that's how much square feet a gallon of paint can cover. This will give you how many gallons of paint you need. You may return this as a double. No need to round up to the next integer. So it's very similar to this, except you're dealing with height now, and the dimensions of the rectangle is different. So what I'd like you, the way I'd like to think about this is, like if you cut along the edge here and then lay out this rectangle to try to find out what its square feet is. And then instead of dividing by 35, you would divide by 200. So it's very similar. Would you agree? Anyway, let's look at question 2. So, here's question 2 of your real midterm. A cable company has hired you to write a C++ program that calculates the monthly bill for their customers. It must meet the following requirements. Greet the customer, ask for the name, number of basic channel packages, and then premium channel packages. The bill is calculated as follows. You can read all this. So it's very similar to question 2 of your practice midterm, okay? Let's look at question 3. They are almost exactly the same. So question 3 of your real midterm. Professor Lawrence Orifella realizes that he hates his class and has decided to give each of his students a 20-point decrease in all their grades for no reason. Help him write the C++ code that allow him to do this. So instead of creating a user-defined function called add 20, you're going to be making a function called subtract 20. It's almost exactly the same, right? You need to make a for loop that iterates through the 10 students and subtract 20 from the grade instead of adding it. And B, a student cannot have a grade lower than 100. If their grade falls below 0, you must set it equal to 0. So the answer for question 3, it's actually going to be exactly the same as this, just with a few changes. Instead of adding 20, you're subtracting 20, and instead of checking the grade is greater than 100, you would check if it's less than 0, and then you would set the grade equal to 0. How easy is that? Right? And then the next question, question 4. Write a user-defined function named printBox that when called will output the following sequence of characters. Looks exactly like this. So instead of printing a plus, we're printing a box, okay? Now, part B is very similar to this. Write a user-defined function named printArrow that when called will accept an integer value called arrow size. And if it's 3, it'll go 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. If it's 5, it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like that. A hint, you will need 2 for loops in a for loop, okay? So, the way you would do this is if you had 2 for loops before, right? It was here. It's right here. It would actually be similar to this code. Now, I made it a little trickier because you're dealing with 2 for loops instead of 2 for loops instead of just 1. But so the outer for loop would deal with this, printing out the new row. But the inner for loop, I wonder how accurate this is. I have to stop and think about it. I have the solution somewhere, but you would have one for loop do this, and another for loop do this. Okay? So this one's a little trickier, but I think you guys can do it. Okay? Lastly, question 5. Consider the code on the next page. It creates a vector of 5 strings of vegetable names, and you want to make the vector contain only vegetable names that you like. And the space is designated. Perform the following. Very similar to this, right? Declare an iterator for a vector of strings. Move it to the position of tomato and erase it because it's not a vegetable, right? Here's your 5 vegetables. With the same iterator, use .begin to point it to the beginning of the list and erase the first item, broccoli, because nobody likes broccoli, right? And then write 2 lines of code that will add 2 vegetable names that you do like that isn't already on the list. Okay? very similar to this. And as an added bonus, I put in an extra credit question for you. In 3 to 10 sentences, explain what passing by reference is, why you should use it, and how and when to use it in your C++ programs. And this extra credit problem is worth 10 points. That's an entire letter grade. The way you would find this answer is you would go to lecture video, whichever lecture video number it is that we discussed pointers and iterators. Just go back to that video and look for the part where I talked about passing by reference, okay? But yeah, this is your real midterm. I will be posting it on Blackboard momentarily. And then stick around because I'm going to host a Zoom meeting. You will all get the Zoom link via email on October 9th from 12 to 12:50, where all of you who attend, you will vote as a class which of these 5 questions is the hardest, and we will do it together as a class. Okay? So, I will post this video. I will post your midterm. And as promised in the Zoom meeting, we're going to talk a little bit, and we're going to talk about whether or not we want to make this midterm last 1 week or 2. But knowing that I was a student before, you're probably all going to vote that you get 2 weeks, right? Okay, well, I'm going to get started on that, and I guess I'll see you in the Zoom meeting later. Bye-bye.